I always thought I knew what it meant to love. I was sure I understood what it meant to be loyal. But when I found myself in Turkey, in those hot summer nights with my girlfriends, my confidence began to crack. It was something new. I couldn't believe this was happening to me. I was far from home, far from my husband, far from my usual life. And in a way, it was that distance from the familiar that made me feel freer than ever before. I hadn't felt this alive in a long time. We went to Turkey not just to relax, but to recharge. To forget about the daily worries, to leave behind the grind of work, responsibility, and the routine of marriage. It was supposed to be a break, a moment of freedom, a chance to feel like myself again, away from the pressure of being someone's wife, daughter, or employee. The days were hot, the nights even hotter. The beach, the sun, the parties, everything felt different. I've never been one to be overly wild, but here it felt like a different version of me was waking up. And as much as I hated to admit it, I was enjoying this new side of myself. We were at a beach bar one evening when I first noticed him. He was just another guy among many, but there was something about him. He had this easy confidence, a kind of charisma that immediately drew me in. And maybe, just maybe, I was craving that attention. I was craving the feeling of being wanted, of being seen as more than just a wife. The more I talked to him, the more I felt myself getting lost in the moment. His smile was warm, his laugh infectious, and when he looked at me, it was like I was the only person in the room. It felt good. Too good. I hadn't felt this noticed, this appreciated in so long. I found myself laughing, flirting, enjoying every second of the conversation. But still, I didn't think anything of it. I was just having fun. It was harmless, right? I had a husband waiting for me back home. I loved him, didn't I? But something about the way he made me feel made me start to question it. Made me start to question everything. The way my husband had become so predictable, so steady, so safe. And I knew it wasn't fair to him. But in that moment, I wasn't thinking about fairness. I wasn't thinking about anything but the here and now. That night, I texted my husband. It wasn't like I had forgotten about him, but the message I sent wasn't about love, or even about him. It was just a random, impulsive thing. I love you. Simple, right? But I sent it at 2 a.m., after everything. After the heat, after the drinks, after the way his touch lingered in my mind. I sent that text like I was trying to hold on to something familiar, something solid. Maybe it was my way of reassuring myself that no matter what was happening here, back home, everything was still the same. But when he replied, my heart sank. He thought it was a result of the night, of the alcohol, the heat, the flirting. He thought it was just a fleeting moment. I wanted to scream at him, to tell him it wasn't just that. But in a way, I also wondered if he was right. Could it be just that? Was it just some impulsive need for excitement that would fade the moment I got back home? I didn't know. I couldn't trust my feelings anymore. Everything was blurry. But I couldn't help but keep going back to him, the guy at the bar. We spent the rest of the night talking, and I found myself looking forward to seeing him again. And every time I did, the guilt gnawed at me a little more. But at the same time, the excitement kept me coming back. The truth was, I wasn't just caught in the rush of a vacation romance. I was questioning everything. About my marriage, my identity, the choices I'd made. I thought I knew who I was. But in this foreign place, with the heat of the night and the thrill of being someone else, I started to wonder if I even knew myself anymore. I couldn't stop thinking about him. Couldn't stop feeling his gaze on me, his presence lingering even when he wasn't around. It wasn't just about physical attraction. It was something deeper, something more unsettling. I was falling into a place I didn't expect. I was no longer just playing around. I was seeking something more, something that felt real. I couldn't tell my husband any of this, though. I couldn't let him know that I was slipping, that I was being drawn to someone else. I didn't even know how to explain it to myself, let alone him. How could I even begin to? Would it make sense? Would he understand? Or would I lose everything I had built? The more I thought about it, the more confused I became. Maybe it was just the thrill of the unknown. Maybe it was just the longing for something different, something more exciting. Or maybe it was something deeper, something I needed to confront before I lost myself completely. But for now, I kept it all inside. I kept it to myself. And when I closed my eyes at night, I tried to convince myself that I was still the same person who had sent that text to her husband, that nothing had really changed. But deep down, I knew the truth. I was already different. The days passed in a blur, each one blending into the next. Mornings spent lounging by the pool, afternoons filled with endless sun and cocktails, and evenings that stretched into wild nights. But as much as I tried to immerse myself in the vacation, a part of me was always aware of what was happening beneath the surface. The guy at the bar, let's call him Sam, was everywhere. He was at the pool when we went for drinks, at the beach when we were sunbathing, and always lingering near enough to catch my attention. The connection between us was undeniable. It was more than just chemistry. It was the kind of connection that makes you forget all reason, that makes you think, maybe this is what I've been looking for. I wasn't just being impulsive anymore. I was starting to find myself looking for him, seeking out those stolen moments when I could talk to him, laugh with him, feel his eyes on me. It wasn't like I was planning to act on anything. I told myself that. But I wasn't fooling anyone, least of all myself. I was already lost in the fantasy of it all, convinced that it was real, that we were real, even though we both knew this was a fleeting thing. One night, after yet another drink-fueled conversation, Sam leaned in close, his breath warm against my ear. "We should get out of here," he said quietly, his voice low. "You and me. Just for a little while. No one needs to know." For a moment, I stood there frozen. My heart raced, and a surge of adrenaline coursed through me. Every part of me wanted to say yes. Every part of me wanted to throw caution to the wind, to give in to the temptation and the excitement. But then, as if a switch flipped in my brain, I heard my husband's voice in my head. "Don't do it." But what did he really know? Wasn't he the one who had become distant over the years? Wasn't he the one who had stopped seeing me for who I was, instead only seeing the role I played? I wasn't just a wife. I was a person with needs, with desires, with feelings that didn't fit neatly into a box. Sam must have sensed my hesitation, because he pulled back slightly, giving me space. But it didn't make the temptation go away. I could feel the pull between us, a magnetic force I couldn't deny. I'd been married long enough to know what was missing from my relationship with my husband. But standing there, I also realized how much of that missing piece was buried deep inside myself, things I had stopped paying attention to. I tried to focus on my phone, on the screen of my messages from my husband. But his texts felt distant, almost like I wasn't even talking to the same person. There was no excitement in his words, no passion, just the usual updates, the polite check-ins, the reminders to eat dinner or take my vitamins. It was the life we had built, but somewhere along the way, I had stopped feeling alive in it. And in that moment, standing in the glow of the neon lights and the hum of the music around me, I realized something painful. I wasn't looking for a one-night affair. I wasn't just looking for validation. I was searching for something I couldn't even name. Something that I didn't know how to get back home. But here, with Sam, it felt like I could find it. Like maybe I could escape from all the roles I had been forced to play and just be me. I didn't leave with Sam that night. I couldn't. The weight of it all was too much. I had a husband waiting for me back home, and no matter how distant he seemed, I couldn't bring myself to betray him. Not yet. But as I climbed into bed that night, I knew I would see Sam again. I couldn't help myself. I had become addicted to the rush, the way he made me feel like I was alive again. It wasn't just physical. It was emotional, it was personal, and it was something I had been starving for without even realizing it. The next day, I texted my husband, trying to convince myself that everything was fine, that I was still the same woman who loved him, who wanted to come home to him. But when I looked at the message, it felt like a lie. The words were true, but they didn't capture the person I was becoming. The person who was questioning everything, from my marriage to my own identity. And then, as I sat by the pool, sipping a drink and watching the world go by, I saw Sam again. His smile was the same, his presence as magnetic as before. I walked over to him, my heart pounding in my chest. We talked for a while, and this time, there was no denying it. We both knew why we were talking. And in that moment, I realized something else. I wasn't just having a temporary fling. I was looking for answers to questions I didn't know how to ask. I didn't know what the future held, But I knew I couldn't go back to the way things were. Not without confronting the truth. The reality of my situation was sinking in. The life I had with my husband was slipping away from me, and no matter how much I tried to deny it, I was already moving in a different direction. And the more I tried to ignore it, the more I realized I couldn't hide from it any longer. As the days went on, I tried to convince myself that everything would be okay, that maybe it was just a phase, a moment of weakness, and that once I got home, it would all go back to normal. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was losing control. I was in a place where nothing made sense anymore, where my life felt like a story I no longer recognized. Every time I spoke to Sam, every time he smiled at me, or leaned in just a little too close, I felt that pull again. It was like gravity pulling me away from everything I thought I knew, from everything I had once believed in. He wasn't just a distraction. He was a reflection of the parts of myself that I had abandoned, the parts that had been buried under years of routine and expectations. I spent the following night with him. Not in the way you might think. No, we didn't end up in some hotel room or get tangled in the sheets. But I was with him, away from the group, walking through the streets of the city. We talked. I let my guard down completely. I shared things with him that I hadn't even told my husband. My fears, my frustrations, my confusion about everything, about us, about my marriage, about who I had become. And as we walked through the crowded streets, with the warm breeze of the Turkish night swirling around us, I felt understood. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was playing a role. I wasn't someone's wife, someone's friend, someone's daughter. I was just me. Just a woman, grappling with her own desires, her own needs, her own questions. And Sam, he listened, he didn't judge. But that night, I didn't do anything I would regret. I didn't cross the line, though it felt like I was teetering dangerously close to it. We parted ways at the end of the night, and as I walked back to my hotel room, I felt a mixture of guilt and relief. Guilt because I knew that what I was doing was wrong, that in some way I was betraying my husband. But relief because for once, I wasn't pretending to be someone I wasn't. I tried to tell myself that this was just a temporary escape, that once I was back home, I would return to my husband. And this would all feel like a distant memory. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that I couldn't just forget about it. I couldn't ignore what I was learning about myself. That night, I sent a message to my husband. It was simple. I miss you. I wasn't lying. I did miss him, in some ways. But it was different. It wasn't the same as before. And as I hit send, a part of me wondered if he would even notice. If he would sense that something had shifted. I didn't expect him to understand, but I couldn't help but hope that he would. The next day, I woke up with a heavy heart. I had a flight to catch in 2 days, and I couldn't stop thinking about the inevitable conversation I would have to have when I got home. But as I prepared for another day in paradise, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was living in 2 worlds, one with my husband, back in the States, and the other with Sam, here in this foreign country. The worst part, I didn't know which world I belonged to anymore. Sam and I met again that afternoon. We didn't talk about anything heavy, didn't go over what had happened between us in the past few days. But there was a shift in the air. It was like we both knew the clock was ticking. The end of the vacation was approaching, and it was only a matter of time before I had to go back to my life, back to my husband, back to the roles I had been playing. And yet, I felt the pull again. There was something in the way he looked at me that made me want to stay, made me want to keep living in this moment, this reality where I could just be myself. No expectations, no responsibilities, no judgments. But deep down, I knew this was a temporary escape. This wasn't real. Sam wasn't the answer. He wasn't going to fix what was broken in me. And even if I stayed with him, I'd eventually have to face the truth. The life I had built with my husband wasn't something I could throw away without consequences. That night, as I sat on the balcony of my hotel room, looking out at the stars and listening to the distant sound of the ocean, I realized something that terrified me. I wasn't just losing myself in this vacation fling. I was losing something bigger, something I wasn't sure I could ever get back. I had changed. The woman I was when I first arrived in Turkey was no longer the woman I was now. And no matter how much I tried to deny it, I knew that when I went back home, nothing would ever be the same. I couldn't unsee what I had learned about myself, about my marriage, about what I was really searching for. But that didn't make it any easier. The truth was, I was scared. Scared of the consequences. Scared of the uncertainty of it all. Scared of losing everything I had. And the hardest part, I didn't know if I was ready to face what I had become. Tomorrow, I would have to make a decision. A decision that would change everything. But for now, all I could do was sit with my thoughts and wonder how much longer I could keep pretending that I wasn't completely falling apart inside. The flight back was the longest part of the whole trip. The whole time, I couldn't stop thinking about what I had left behind in Turkey. It wasn't just Sam. It was the sense of freedom, the feeling that I was finally being seen for who I truly was. Not just the role I'd been playing for so many years. I didn't know what it was about him, about that momentary escape. But somehow, in those brief moments of connection, I felt more alive than I had in years. It was intoxicating, and I wasn't ready to let go of it. But as the plane descended back toward home, the reality of everything I had to face hit me. I was going back to a life I didn't feel sure of anymore. I was going back to my husband, the man I had promised to spend forever with, but who, over time, had become someone I didn't fully recognize. Someone who didn't seem to see me as anything more than a partner in a safe, predictable life. And that was the hardest part, the part I couldn't stop thinking about. The way things had changed, slowly over time. The passion had faded. The spontaneity was gone. The excitement, the thrill of being a couple had turned into routine. What had happened to us? Where had the connection gone? I had tried to ignore it for years, buried my doubts under the weight of everyday life, but being in Turkey, feeling alive again, had forced me to confront it. And now there was no going back. When I finally stepped off the plane, I felt like a stranger returning home. Everything looked the same. My house, the same cozy place we had built together. The little things we had shared, the jokes, the quiet mornings, the late-night conversations, flashed in my mind, and I tried to hold on to them. But the truth was, I didn't feel the same way anymore. My husband was waiting for me at the airport. His smile was warm, his arms open for a hug. But as I wrapped my arms around him, I realized something that made my chest tighten. I didn't feel the same excitement I had once felt when I came home to him. There was no spark, no thrill. Just a deep, hollow sadness inside me that I couldn't shake. "Hey, babe." "Missed you?" he said, pulling away and brushing a strand of hair from my face. I forced a smile, but inside, I felt like I was playing a role I no longer fit into. "I missed you too," I replied, my voice sounding so distant, even to my own ears. The drive home was filled with the usual small talk. He asked how the trip was, and I gave him the usual answers: good, relaxing, beautiful. But it wasn't just the usual conversation. There was something different between us now. A gap. A space I didn't know how to fill. A part of me that had shifted, and I wasn't sure if I could go back to the way things were. When we got home, I unpacked my bags in a haze. I moved through the motions of daily life, but everything felt out of place. I wanted to talk, to tell him what I had experienced, to explain how everything had changed for me. But how could I? How could I tell him that I felt like I had lost myself, and that a part of me wasn't sure I wanted to come back? How could I explain to him that in those few days away, I had discovered something about myself that I couldn't ignore? He kissed me on the forehead before heading to bed. His touch was warm, but it felt too familiar, too far removed from the excitement I had felt with Sam. I knew it wasn't fair to him, but I couldn't shake the sense of betrayal that lingered in my chest. Not because I had physically done anything with Sam, but because I had let myself emotionally slip away from my marriage. I had let myself wonder if I could find something else, something different, something more. That night, as I lay in bed next to my husband, I couldn't sleep. The silence between us was deafening, and my mind wouldn't stop racing. I had to make a choice, but I wasn't ready. How could I be? The truth hit me hard in the middle of the night. I had crossed a line, not in the way people usually talk about betrayal, but in a deeper, more insidious way. I had allowed myself to drift away from my husband, emotionally and mentally. I had begun to look for something outside of our marriage, to fill a void that should have been filled with him. I thought about calling Sam. I thought about sending him one last message, just to feel that rush again. Just to feel seen. But I stopped myself. This wasn't about him. This was about me. About what I had become, and what I had let my life become. The next morning, my husband and I had breakfast together. He seemed his usual self, asking about the trip, about how I was feeling. But I couldn't look him in the eye. I couldn't answer his questions without feeling like a fraud. How could I be here with him when I knew how much had changed inside me? How could I pretend that everything was fine when I felt like I was standing on the edge of something I couldn't undo? I knew I had to tell him the truth. I knew I couldn't keep pretending. But how could I say it? How could I explain everything without destroying everything we had built together? As I sat there, trying to figure out what to say, I realized something. It wasn't just about my trip. It wasn't about Sam or the things I had done. It was about the fact that I had been avoiding the truth for so long, avoiding the deep dissatisfaction I had been feeling for years, avoiding the fact that we had been drifting apart for far longer than I had admitted. I didn't want to hurt him. I didn't want to break his heart. But I couldn't keep living a lie. I had to face the consequences of my actions, of my choices, and as much as I was terrified of what came next, I knew it was the only way forward. The moment of truth was coming. I didn't know how it would unfold, or where it would take us. But I knew one thing: I couldn't keep pretending that I was the same woman who left for Turkey. That woman was gone. And now, I had to figure out who I was becoming.